Welcome to the Michigan Football Junkies podcast. I'm Jeremy Miller. Today, we are going to get into the Indiana Hoosier preview. We have Mr. Dopirak from the Herald Times over in Indiana on in a few minutes. But before we do that, we're going to get into the Michigan side of things. I think we need to spice up the playbook just a little bit. We seem to be getting a little stale. Yeah, granted, it's Iowa. You don't need to do a whole lot. It's probably more about playing conservative and not taking risks. But this is literally the last couple weeks, even with the Maryland game. We need to have some more end arounds. We need to get Henning the ball in space, whether it's a screen pass, a little drag route. You got Roman Wilson, you've got Ronnie Bell, you've got Andrell Anthony. We need some slants, we need some drag routes. Get these guys going with the ball in their hands and room to run. A.J. Henning is one of the most dangerous guys on this team with the ball in his hands. And he just hasn't got the ball that much. It seems like they're relying on J.J. McCarthy and Blake Corum way too much. Oh, J.J. will... he'll make something happen. Oh, Blake Corum will break one out. We have Donovan Edwards back. That's a huge help. They kind of played him sparingly, knowing he's coming off an injury. But with this week, I think they're going to give him the ball a little bit more. They're going to let him get back into the swing of things. But when you really look at it, A.J. Henning has 2 carries for 9 yards. One of them was right up the middle against UConn. Which, hey, they said they were going to get him the ball a little bit more that way, but where's it been? We need more of it. I think they need to spread it out a little bit more. It's pretty much JJ, Blake, Ronnie, and Roman. That's about it. Well, and Luke Schoonmaker too. Let's not forget about him. But it just seems a little stale. We need to do a little bit more. Get some more screen passes out there for some of these guys like Andrell, like A.J. Henning. Let's get these guys the ball in their hands. But the other one I would like to see is, it just seems like we are a little too inconsistent with our pass rush. I know they're kind of playing around with some things. They're it's Mike Morris. Oh, it's McGregor. Now it's Oki. They're kind of going. They're kind of moving some pieces around, trying some different things. I think they need to do a few more blitzes. It seems like we are letting that quarterback get way too comfortable back there for long periods of time. Mike Sanders still seems to be a great guy to blitz off the edge. Let him come on some of those. Let Jalen Harrell drop back, switch it up just a little bit. Blitz up the middle. We can take some more chances, especially when you have Harrell out there for some of the time. If you've got Junior Colson, you've got Mike Barrett, you've got Jalen Harrell all on the field at the same time with Mike Morris on the other side. Why not let Harrell drop back, blitz Sanders still, run Junior Colson up the middle? Let's throw something a little different out there. Make him look at something a little different. Let's get some pressure on this quarterback. But I know it's hard to replace Hutch. I know it's hard to replace David Ajabo. But we've got to get something going here. Mike Morris finally started to get a more consistent pass rush at the end of the game last week. Mazi Smith has been doing very well, but you're talking about a guy that's basically playing the nose. How many times is he going to get in there to rush the passer, to actually sack him, put a hit on? If you get 6 or 7 sacks out of Mazi Smith this year, that's a huge year for him. One, he didn't have any coming into the season, but number 2, you're talking about a guy who's on the interior. Other than Aaron Donald, what interior guy gets lots of sacks? And even with Aaron Donald, they move him to the outside. So that's just something I think that we're going to need to I don't know, be more creative with. Let's get something going with these guys. We've got to put some more pressure on these players for the opposing teams. Make the quarterback, make him uncomfortable. Get after him. Maybe I'm asking a little too much. We knew it was going to be a transition with the defense this year. I think our coverage is good. I didn't think it was that great this past game, but I also think maybe they were playing a little conservative and just trying not to let anything get behind them. Knowing that Iowa's not a good offensive team, I just wish they didn't play so conservative if that was the case. I mean, I'm not Jim Harbaugh. I don't know what the actual game plan was. This is just going off of what we all looked at, what we all saw on this past Saturday. It just seemed like they're playing conservative. So, without any further ado, okay, next up we have Dustin Dopirak from the Herald Times over in Indiana. He is an Indiana beat writer. How's it going today?
Doing good, Jimmy. How are you, man?
Man, if I was any better, I'd be you. So we got a big game coming up this week. We got a nice big Big Ten matchup: Indiana Hoosiers and the Michigan Wolverines. And figured let's get in one of the guys that knows the team best. Get one of the beat writers in here. Tell us a little bit about what Michigan has to face this week. Tom Allen, he took over the team in 2016, and you really saw a rise out of Indiana. A slow, steady rise going from 2016 till now, up until last year, which was a lot of injuries mounted. Correct?
Oh, that's part of it. That's not all of it. Is the thing. Yeah, things were going on a pretty progressive incline. Obviously, the COVID year in 2020, a lot of things came together for them. Some of it was just them sort of aging into themselves, basically just a lot of guys developing, coming together at the right time. But they also, I think, took advantage of the fact that, a lot of the other programs in the Big Ten had guys opt out. And I think, obviously Michigan being one of them, Penn State being another, managed to beat some teams they don't usually beat. And I think, last year, injuries were a big part of it. I think you had, Tywone Mullen obviously was an All-American in 2020, and he's hurt for most of that year. Both quarterbacks get hurt, and by the end of the season, you're dealing with a couple of backups, or you're dealing with a third-string quarterback, a true freshman, who hadn't been there for spring ball. And so that's obviously, injuries were a driving force, but I mean, the guys would tell you that they felt like, in retrospect, too many people thought that 2020 was just going to carry over. Basically, that 2020 was going to be a baseline, and whatever work they were going to put in was just going to make them better than that. When you still have to meet that. You still have to work pretty hard just to meet that baseline. They didn't feel like they had as just much devotion last year as there needed to be. And when things started out poorly, really right out of the gate, basically they were down 14-0 to Iowa before basically anybody sat down. And from that point forward, they just had a hard time getting any kind of recovery. So I say all that to say, it could be really easy just to throw away last year at 2021 for Tom Allen and the staff. But just because of the injuries, it's okay. Well, that's flukish, but there's some fault there on behalf of the players that were healthy, and therefore on behalf of the coaching staff. So Tom Allen obviously finds himself in a bit of a rough spot, especially now coming off this Nebraska loss. There is a drastic different tone around Tom Allen than there was 2 years ago at this time.
Yeah, and I saw they had to replace the offensive coordinator, which Michigan knows quite well because that was a dark time for Michigan. So we don't even like to hear the name Nick Sheridan a whole lot, because that might have been the worst quarterback we've ever had here. But
there's that.
he was,
yeah.
So he's gone. How's the new offensive coordinator? How's that transition been from last year to this year?
It's been interesting. Walt Bell's the guy. I mean, he was head coach at UMass. He's been, so basically what he's done, the transition is he's brought tempo, and the tempo itself, I think, has has had some dividends. And basically, they tend to be the more conditioned team towards the end of halves. I think, even Saturday night against Nebraska, they managed to they have two really, really good drives at the end of the half. And I think tempo really played a part in that because they're just running you all the time. And I think they produce some wear and tear on defenses. So there's been some value there. But they're only so explosive. Really, they're averaging a lot more yards per game. But part of that is because they're averaging a lot more plays per game. They're one of the fastest operating teams in college football. I mean, I think going into last week, I think they were maybe third or fourth in the country in offensive plays. But they were only averaging about 4.8 yards per play going into last night, and now I think that number probably went down or maybe stayed the same. And the issue is they just only have so much talent, and a lot their best players were not on the field last night. Cam Camper came down with some kind of non-COVID illness and didn't even travel to Lincoln, and he's been their best wide receiver. And DJ Matthews has probably been their second best wide receiver, and he's dealing with, we think is a hamstring. They haven't really diagnosed it yet. I'm sure they're diagnosed, but they haven't told us basically what he's out with. But I mean, it was something that he could warm up with last night, and was kind of a game time decision. And the game time decision was no. And after that, they have some guys that are okay, but they don't have anybody that's really a game breaker. So the tempo, I think, allows them maybe to mask some things or maybe to get some advantages where they don't really have one. But so I think the tempo in itself has been an okay transition, but they're just having a hard time really getting a lot going. It's not a great offensive line. The skill position guys are just okay. Quarterback's just okay, and what it turns into is an offense that's just okay all the way around. So there's I think they're better off with Bell than they were with Sheridan. So I think Bell is ultimately in a positive direction, but there's only so much in the way of offensive playmakers right now to make anything work.
Now, what about Camper and Matthews? Are they going to be back for this upcoming game, or is that still up in the air?
I imagine it's up in the air right now. I would think because it's a non-COVID illness that I would think Camper will be back. Apparently Matthews, they must have a bug going through because Hassan Mccullough got the rush linebacker who's been really effective. He was out for a lot of last week's game, and apparently that was because he was sick for a lot of the week of practice. DJ Matthews was apparently sick at the end of the Western Kentucky game, so he had fewer snaps toward the end of that. So they must have something rolling through, and if I'm going off of those two, I'm guessing it'll be something that he's okay with, by next week. So he should be fine, presuming that's not something worse than it sounds like it is. Matthews, I think, is going to be, if it is a hamstring, if that's what it sounds like, then that's obviously one of those ones that, it seems to be a couple weeks that you're going up to the line and thinking maybe not. And it can be a game time decision, but it can be a game time decision a couple weeks in a row. And sometimes the game time decision can be no. And even when you're throwing him out there, you're not getting the best version of him. So we'll be interested. It will be interesting to see where that goes. Can't say for now, but I think it's going to be one of those deals where, there's whether he plays or doesn't play, you probably won't know until Saturday game time.
Okay. Well, that's one thing that you guys definitely need is a lot of wide receivers, because watching a little bit of Indiana football, I've noticed you guys like to go 5 wide a lot.
They do. Bell really likes to spread it out. He's a guy that he says we try to go as wide and as fast as humanly possible. He likes that, but he also likes to run the football, more than some of his predecessors did. He really coached a lot under Blake Anderson, who's head coach at Utah State now, and that's kind of what they did. Is going wide, going fast. But Bell's a big fan of a bigger fan than Blake. He'll tell you of keeping the ball on the ground. So they tend to go more 3 wide, but they will look to go 4 and 5 when they feel like the moment strikes, when it's the right opportunity to do so, 3rd and longs, and some other situations. So they do like to do that. And, with Camper and Matthews out, they've got a bunch of guys, again, that are okay. Anderson Kobe, a transfer they got from Tennessee, has been okay. But when they don't have Camper and Matthews, they don't really have just really game breaker types, guys that can make something out of nothing or just scorch somebody. In a lot of cases, they're throwing into areas where there is a defender, because, when Matthews and Camper aren't on the field, they're not necessarily blowing those guys away.
Yeah. So, I mean, with your receiving core, and Camper is definitely, he gets open. He looks like he's got some muscle to him. Matthews definitely looks like the guy that he needs his hamstring, because he looks like a perfect slot receiver, like a guy to get over the middle and really get up the field. So you're definitely going to need those receivers, for Connor. Now, is it Bazalek?
Bazelak.
Bazelak.
His father corrected me. Actually, I kept calling him Bazelak, and his father texted me or emailed me to tell me I wasn't getting it right. So it is Bazelak. It is two syllables.
Okay.
But yeah, no, that's totally it. Camper's just he's an amazing story. Camper's, he's listed at 200. He might be taller than that. But at high school at like 5'9" and was barely recruited. And went to Sam Houston State, tried to walk on. He's from Texas. And they didn't even notice him. But then he went to community college, and that time really just sprouted up and turning into a guy that was, again, as short as me, and all of a sudden is a big time Big Ten bodied wide receiver. And so yeah, he uses a lot of that muscle, but he does have good speed, really good route runner, super smart wideout, just really understands it because he studies a lot. He's a guy that they say just comes into staff meetings on his own, like we'll literally just show up at staff meetings. They call him Coach Cam because he just shows up, even where he's not supposed to be necessarily, but he'll just show up and he just wants to listen. And Matthews is a guy, I mean, he was a really highly regarded prospect coming out of high school in Jacksonville, and was a U.S. Army All-American, started at Florida State, was just one of those guys, just one of the fastest players in that class. Just the pure speed is really, really there. And, I think he took a punt back in the All-American game, in the U.S. Army All-American game, took a couple punts back for Florida State when he was there. Just got a lot of juice, obviously. So, yeah, when a guy like that the hamstring isn't there, that takes away a lot of what he likes to do. So he really needs to get that back healthy before he's himself, so that they could really use them. And they just really need both of those guys. It was just so evident last night that they didn't have them. There were so many occasions where you say, okay, well, this is a moment where you just try to get something to Camp, or you're 3rd and 8, 3rd and 9. And they were 2 of 15 on 3rd down, and they've been a pretty good 3rd down team. I think they'd converted on, 47%, including a good chunk, close to 40% of their 3rd and longs, which tells you something basically. And they get in too many 3rd and longs, but they found a way really to convert a lot of those, in large part because Camper was a guy that found a way to get open and found a way to make plays. And without him, they just really didn't have a real answer.
Sean Shivers and Josh Henderson, they kind of split up the backfield. And I did see Jalen Lucas get on the field. Was that last game or the game before last? He had a big.
It was run. Last game. Got a couple snaps and turned one into a big old 34-yard run. So the entire Indiana fan base is asking me and asking anybody who will talk to them, why on earth is Jalen Lucas not playing more? And the issue is he's 5'9", 170 pounds, and you can only ask so much for somebody of that build in pass protection. Sean Shivers are a lot, those guys are grown men. They've been in college football for several years, had a chance to really bulk up. Shivers is just a ball of muscle. I mean, he's 5'9" himself, and he's probably goes like maybe 190, 195, but he is solid rock. I mean, just muscles on top of muscles. And Henderson's pretty close to that. He's a little bit taller, a little bit more traditional tailback build, around 6'1", 220, somewhere in that range. But both of those guys are just there, and they can handle an oncoming, linebacker, where Lucas is going to have a hard time keeping that guy in front of him. And I think he takes the weight room seriously. You can tell. It's not like he came in with just baby fat or anything like that. I mean, he's a guy that is pretty ripped up for what he is. He's just not a large person. But he's got some real speed, as you could tell from that. Really good moves, really good speed, just terrific with the ball in the open field. So they've been trying to get him more opportunities out there, but it's tough because, again, they don't have a great offensive line. So that's going to ask for something from the running back. There is going to be those out in a blitz the running back's got to pick up. So there's only, basically that limits the amount of opportunities you have for a guy like Lucas. And basically when you put him on the field, you got to find a way to get him the ball. is really what it is. I mean, you can't just have him out there, and sometimes he gets the ball, sometimes he doesn't, and he's there to block when he doesn't. It's, basically like if you put him in that position, he's going to have a hard time getting anything done. He's got to at least run a route. He's got to do something, and you got to bring somebody else in to, just take care of the dirty work inside, but just in the pocket. So that puts him in a little bit of a tough spot. But he is a really, he is a bright spot. I mean, he's not necessarily, I talk about him like he's a bad problem to have. He's not. It's just they've got to figure out what to do with him and how, and where he fits, and how they get the ball in his hand, because he's really good with the ball in his hand, as I think was obvious in the couple of times he got the ball on Saturday night.
Now, as far as the offensive line, was taking a look at a little bit with stats here, and in the Big Ten, this could also be with offensive scheme and play calling, but right now Indiana leads the Big Ten in tackles for loss allowed, and as far as sacks allowed, they are 11th. So is that something that is a standout of a couple games that's been fixed, or is this going to be something that could be an issue in this game coming forward?
It's going to be an issue. I mean, scheme's got something to do with it, but it mostly has to do with the fact they just haven't been very good up front. And they lost what many would presume to be their most talented offensive lineman in Matthew Bedford, who tore his ACL in week 1 against Illinois. So since then, they've really been kind of, scrambled a little bit. I think Luke Haggard is a pretty good left tackle. You haven't seen a lot of occasions where you see him get toasted on the left side. Basically, you haven't seen a lot of the sacks haven't necessarily been blind sides from what I've seen, or what stands out to me. But they've got a Division II transfer in Parker Hanna, who's playing right tackle. He's had some decent moments, but he's had some rough ones. And in the interior, they're just okay. It was basically like they flipped last night. Zach Carpenter had been the center. He's apparently got some kind of hand injury that's affecting him on snaps. So they moved him out to left guard and flipped Mike Kadick, who was a left guard, into center. That went okay last night, but I mean, the first play of the game, they had to call timeout before they even ran it. So that tells you, I think there's probably some discoordination going on up front. But it has been an issue. It is the issue that everybody in basically the Indiana fan base is talking about, they're upset because they feel like they should have made a change in offensive line coach this offseason. They didn't. They kept Darren Hiller and stuck with him for one more year. Fans are not thrilled about that fact. But it just, I don't know what difference a change would make right now, because I think they're just, there's just not a ton of just raw talent up there. They've recruited, I think, a lot of other positions on the squad very well, in particular on defense, but there have not been a lot of offensive line recruits that have really stood out. Some of the younger guys that I think were among the higher rated are starting to get some playing time. Khalil Benson, I think, has been okay at right guard. I think, Josh Sales is a guy they should probably get more of a look at right tackle. He's a pretty highly recruited redshirt freshman. But the group that I have out there right now, they're just not going to dominate anybody, and every once in a while somebody's going to get there. Now, to your point, as far as scheme is concerned, when you run a lot of plays, there's going to be some negatives. You're probably going to end up having more negatives. When you're dropping back as much as Bazelak is, there's going to be some sacks. I mean, I think he might. There's a good chance. Let me just double check it to make sure I'm right. He's going to be up there when it comes to attempts. Basically, he's going to be. He might lead the Big Ten. He might. Actually, if you told me he leads the country in attempts, I wouldn't be surprised. So if you drop back that many times, there's going to be some sacks. And
he does lead the Big Ten in attempts.
Yeah, I figured that. I was looking at the wrong thing, but yeah, 246. Yeah, he's got 24 more attempts than anybody else. You're talking drastic difference from the rest of the Big Ten. So there's going to be some sacks there, but there's too many. Basically, he's facing too much pressure, and there are too many times where he drops back and just has to throw it away. He's got a pretty quick trigger as far as that's concerned. He's been smart about making sure he gets rid of the football when the pressure is coming and he doesn't feel like he can escape it. Was really good about that against Illinois. I think he was only sacked once, and there was a lot of times he almost was. But yeah, there are too many guys getting in the backfield, too many defenders getting in the backfield, and it's an issue. It's going to continue to be an issue.
Yeah, it looks like as far as the biggest culprits, looking at the on PFF, It looks like it's the right tackle, then the center, and then the right guard. So it looks like it's mainly that right side. The left side are both of them are under 10%, under 9% actually. So they're it looks like most of that pressure is all coming from the right hand side. Now over to the defensive side, your defensive coordinator, that is Chad Wilt. How has he been this year compared to previous seasons with that with the
Chad,
defense?
yeah, I mean, Allen is calling the defense.
Okay.
Is the thing. That was one of the major announcements, that the major sort of off-season decisions that Allen made, was that he was going to go back to calling the defense. Obviously, he was hired initially as defensive coordinator in 2016 and took over as head coach because basically Fred Glass, the athletic director, saw some things in Kevin Wilson's program that he did not like. So Allen was defensive coordinator when he took over, and he stayed defensive coordinator for, I think, at least the first 2 years. Yeah, I think first 2 years he was head coach. He still called defensive plays, and I think even I don't think he even called anybody defensive coordinator. So it took him a while, but to be ready to relinquish that. And it's still his defense, even when he hired Kane Womack. He promoted Kane Womack to be defensive coordinator and to call the plays. It was still Allen's plays. It was still Allen's design. And it's a 4-2-5 that's very aggressive. They blitz a lot. They really care about turnovers and takeaways and sacks. I mean, that's something they really believe in. Allen's the sort that's like, hey, keep the big plays in front of you, but be willing to give up some yards, be willing to give up some chunks. You're not going to zero anybody out against today's offense, but try to flip the field by going after the football. Get guys looking at the ball, playing the ball instead of always playing their man. And just try to take the ball away that way and put your offense in advantageous situations, because you only have so much offensive talent. So that's the way Allen plays, and really felt like they got away from that last year. They were one of the leaders in the country in 2020 in sacks and takeaways. They might have had the most takeaways per game. Obviously, it was COVID, so not everybody was playing the same amount of games or finished with the same amount of games. But and that was still under Womack. Womack went and got a head coaching job at South Alabama. He hired Carlton Warren from. He had been, I think he was at Georgia. He was defensive coach at Georgia, assistant, like secondary coach. And they made him defensive coordinator. It felt like, they kind of got away from the spirit of the thing. And he left for North Carolina to be part of Gene Chizik's staff, defensive staff over there. So Allen decided, okay, I'm going to retake the reins of this thing, and I'm going to get back to being more aggressive and kind of instilling this stuff. But he hired Wilt. He calls him sort of the organizer of the defense. So what that means is, in practice, is Wilt runs the defensive staff meetings. He's really making a good bit of personnel decisions, but Allen is calling the plays. So basically, it's taking a lot of the defensive administrative stuff off of Allen's plate and letting him be the head coach during the week and not sort of run him ragged like he felt like he was in the first couple of years when he was head coach and coordinator. But it's still, at the end of the day, he's the one that's dialing it up. And I think that's just sort of to make sure his signature is really still on it. So that doesn't mean he doesn't show up in defensive meetings, whatever, but Wilt's job is kind of to keep everybody in line during the week, run all the staff meetings, just sort of really be in tune with the players, what's working out in practice, and just being a good right-hand man for Allen. And it works because Wilt's almost just like Allen. It's almost creepy, to be honest, in terms of how they operate. Just super excitable, over-the-top positive people, like people that are so positive you don't even believe they're real, but they're really genuine. I mean, like, there are some people that kind of fake that. These guys don't. I mean, they are just, they're the type of guy that they've got quotes for everything. They read books on everything about leadership and grit and all this kind of stuff, and making the most out of yourself. They're really into that, and they're super, super positive. So they get along just absurdly well. They're just almost the same guy. Well, it's just his younger version. But Allen,
So they're like a real life Ted Lasso.
It's something like that. Yes, exactly. Yes, they are very much that.
And Tom Allen really has dialed up the defense. You can see that just by the numbers. I mean, they're third in the Big Ten in sacks as a team.
Yeah.
And you have this freshman that now, Hassan Mccullough, He's basic. Did you say he was dinged up last game and didn't play?
He was sick last game.
Oh, sick. I'm sorry. That's right.
He
He
had
was
been
sick
sick
last game.
he had been sick during practice that week. I mean, like they got him out there to play, but he hadn't been 100%.
Yeah, and he still has 4 sacks on the season, and that's he's a true freshman, correct?
Yeah, he's a true freshman, and he's not playing all the time. I mean, he's not an every down guy. He gets in on a lot of, it's mostly coming on pass rush downs, basically. I mean, it is usually when he comes in, he's there for that. He plays a little bit of Husky. They have a couple, with the hybrid positions. Basically, there's a bull that's kind of a hybrid defensive end, outside linebacker. It's really a stand-up end, basically, but he does drop back. And then that's kind of where he plays most of the time. But every once in a while, they put him in this Husky position that's kind of halfway between like an outside linebacker and a safety. And so because he played safety in high school, he played defensive end in high school, he played linebacker in high school, he's played everywhere. 6'5", 225, really built like a wide receiver, but a lot of good speed, loves defense, loves hitting people, and just speed that matches in a lot of different areas. So basically, I mean, they weren't sure what to do with him when they got him. They just knew it could be anything. And they decided that basically the best way to get him on the field, they like what they have at linebacker. That's kind of where they started him out to get really sensitive defense. But they've just put him in these rush end positions, and he's maybe playing half the snaps, maybe. But I don't even think it's even that many. But when he gets when he gets clean off the edge, he can really get to people. He's just really tough to block, coming downhill in a pass rush. Excellent speed, just phenomenal athlete. Got some Micah Parsons qualities to him. I don't know if I'd take him that far, but a guy, again, you could flip him over on the offensive side and play wide receiver. He's got that kind of body. He's got that kind of speed and athleticism. It wouldn't be a terrible idea to find a way to put the ball in his hand, but he is just a terrific athlete and super intelligent kid. Dad is running backs coach at Notre Dame, was running backs coach at Indiana. They were concerned that they were going to lose him. Actually, they weren't. Indiana fans were concerned they were going to lose him when McCullough left for Notre Dame this offseason. But Hassan stayed because he really felt good about what they wanted to do with him on defense. And they just put him in a lot of positions where he's tough to block, coming off the edge, and just basically third downs, he's trouble. And so they'll use him on earlier downs sometimes, but really third down when they're just bringing the house, McCullough's tough to block.
He actually reminds me of a player that used to play for Michigan and is now in Kansas City. That's Frank Clark. He was the same thing. He played all over the field in high school and played safety actually in the Ohio/Pennsylvania game that they play at high school at the end of the season every year. Yep. And he played safety in that game somewhat. And now he's a defensive lineman. So, still kind of that same body style, those long arms, kind of a taller kid, but, still doesn't have a lot of weight to him, but definitely has the frame to bulk up a little bit more. So I think he's going to be the guy that turned into a good pass rusher for Indiana. But I appreciate you coming on. I appreciate you really filling us in and letting us know what we have coming for us this Saturday. Where can we find you to follow any of your work, as far as whether on social media or any of your articles that you write?
Yeah, my Twitter is just at Dustin Dopirak, just at my name, and you can find all of my stuff there. There's everything I tweet out, but IndyStar.com or HeraldTimesOnline.com or HeraldTimes.com is where all my stuff is. Obviously, just cover or any Gannett paper, basically, where you might find Indiana coverage. You can find our stuff there, myself and my beat partner Zach Osterman. So that's where you can find all of our stuff, and we're going to keep covering. We'll see where this goes. So it should be interesting on Saturday, but Indiana's going to, you talk about what's coming for Michigan. Indiana knows what's coming for it. So should be an interesting one, but yeah, thanks for having me on.
Absolutely. Hey, one last thing. What would you give for a final score? What's your prediction?
Michigan by a lot, by a whole lot. I'm going to say 40-17.
40-17. Okay. All right. I appreciate it. Thank you so much. It's great to be a Michigan Warrior.